I'm an engineer at heart, and I love solving problems. I'm going to talk about an experience that I had in the not too recent past that went from something agonizing and very painful, and I've heard words like that used today, actually. And after an aha moment that happened in my team, it led to a different feeling, a feeling of excitement about the possibility for the future. And that's what I'm going to be talking a little bit about. If there's one reason that we're all here today, it's that we share an understanding of the huge problem that obsolescence poses. And I think we all also know that there's a huge opportunity. We've already heard that in some of the other talks today. But in a deep down, visceral sense, you never really feel opportunity. You feel more like the pain or the fear of the big problem. I think a big problem is, in a lot of ways, like stepping into a very large, pitch black, empty room. And I'm going to show you a picture of a book. This is one of my favorite books. This is a photo of the actual text of the book, whether you can see that good or not. This is Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves, and I bring this up to say that this book actually requires problem solving just to read. If you look at the text boxes and the text that is written in different directions, it's pretty wild. But the connection here is that in this story, a family discovers a gigantic, impossibly giant, pitch black, empty room inside, somehow, of their suburban home. And I think that a difficult problem is like being in an empty room. And if you can put yourself in a giant, pitch black, empty room for a moment, you can imagine it as a problem that you're going to try to solve. What would you do? You might begin by holding your hands out defensively in front of you and starting to shuffle like this a little bit, looking for the walls of the room and trying to get a sense of your bearings. And then you're in problem solving mode right now. So you may yell out and just see if you hear an echo. You might take your shoe off and throw it up in the air and see if you hit the ceiling. Or you're in this black room and you have no idea what to do, and you're doing things that look pretty stupid probably to an outside observer, but you are trying to make some progress, and at some point those stupid things, probably you refine what you're doing a little bit and you iterate again, and eventually you start to make some progress. And bringing it back to obsolescence, I think obsolescence is like that big black empty room because there's a lot of money involved. It's a very complicated problem, and the solutions, this is the key, the solutions aren't prescriptive. I know we handle solving or managing obsolescence often with very prescriptive solutions, like the playbook is pretty small. I'm gonna choose lifetime buy, or I'm gonna choose redesign, or that's kind of the end of my playbook. But it doesn't have to be that way. I also have noticed in working on teams, particularly an obsolescence management team, but it's good for all teams, that there's a little bit of a paradox. You've got typically a very technical problem. Usually your team is staffed with tons of technical people, but you don't have enough people with organizational, communication, business, those soft skills. And then at the same time, you take a non-technical problem, and you usually have plenty of those people, but maybe not a lot of technical brain power devoted to it, to find the optimal solution. And for that reason, in my career, I've always tried to develop both technical and non-technical skills. And when I go into a team, like an obsolescence management team, I try to look around at the problem and the people on the team, and if we've got a lot of technical skill, I try to think of the problem through the lens of those softer skills and try to do whatever may be needed most. I I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that for the first 5 years of my career, I really didn't know how Raytheon's business worked. I thought that Raytheon was this big monolithic company that we kind of just talked to our customers, we found out what they wanted, we developed these innovative solutions that met and exceeded their expectations, and then we executed on our agreements and continued to win more business, and that was it. That Raytheon and our customers were pretty much the end of the story. That all changed after I got involved in supply chain in 2015 and realized that we have thousands and thousands of suppliers at Raytheon, and their innovations and products basically set the upper bounds of what we can possibly hope to achieve for our customers. Another year later, when I joined the obsolescence management team, I got even a more detailed link between our suppliers, innovative products, the availability or disappearance of those products, and our ability to enact and execute our long-term business strategy. So, being part of that supply chain obsolescence management team, one of the first big problems that we encountered soon after I joined the team was an announced end of life on a microchip that was used throughout multiple radar systems. The impact of this was absolutely devastating, and there's a couple of reasons why it was so devastating. One, we only had 2 months to figure out what we were going to do about it. Two, the quantity that we needed to support this system through the end of its life was governed by dozens of independent events that were highly uncertain. So incredible complexity to try to figure out what that number actually is. And third, we were looking at a 7-figure price tag to get the parts that we thought was the right amount according to our business forecast. So if I can get a show of hands, does this situation sound at all familiar to anybody in the audience? Could you raise your hand? Can you keep your hand raised if it's familiar from something you've dealt with in the last year? And we're over half. Last 6 months, keep them raised. And a few hands are going down, but maybe right now you have a solution or a problem that looks like that. So we still have some people. Some guys I know, hands are raised loud and proud over there. So nothing really happened. So we have 2 months here. Nothing really happened at first. It took a few weeks, but eventually, talking about it in the team, we started to be able to boil it down to 3 key things that a solution needed to have. Just what are we don't even know what the solution is, but we know 3 important things that it needs to have. One thing that we need is flexibility, because we need the ability to buy all the way up to that maximum forecasted need that we might have, or some other amount. We even had scenarios where we would need 0 parts, just to make things even harder. So we needed flexibility. The second thing that we needed was risk reduction, because we didn't have any customer contracts for any of these parts, so there was no firm, real need that we could hang our hat on. And for that reason, it would be impossible to go pitch to senior leadership and get approval on any kind of solution without a large reduction in the initial investment that we needed to make. The 7 figures was just completely infeasible. So we needed to lower our our initial expenditure of cash. The third thing that we needed was time related to everything else, but time to actually see if a few of those events that were so uncertain, which way were they going to fall, one way or the other. Time to talk to our customers and figure out what the forecast might be. Those were the 3 elements. I was complaining about this to everybody. This problem, as we kind of searched around trying to get a solution, I was complaining about it in meetings I had with other suppliers. I'm a supply chain manager, so I'm constantly meeting with various suppliers who have nothing to do with this particular obsolescence problem, but regardless, I'm complaining to them. And complaining to my wife and my family and people who didn't care and had no idea what I was talking about. But eventually I complained about it more at a conference that I was at last year. And after a panel discussion, I had somebody approach me who said that they knew about a distributor who was working deals that seemed like a solution. They were working with manufacturers to get those manufacturers to continue producing parts after end-of-life notices had passed, and in some cases rescind them altogether. And these deals had all three of the things that we needed. They gave us the flexibility, so we were able to buy all up to the maximum number that we might possibly need, or even maybe a little bit more, or some other amount, or none. So we had that, check. They allowed us to make a fraction of an initial investment compared to that big price tag that we were originally looking at. So that reduced our upfront risk. And third, it gave us time, because these were agreements that could be structured in 3, 5, 7, even 10-year long-term agreements with set, tiered, known pricing. And I want to take a moment to identify a fourth benefit that was especially important to our customers that resulted from this deal. When you think of the set pricing, multi-year, known quantity, known price per quantity, and what that meant to our customer is predictability. We had the ability now to take what is, for all of our customers, a risk that something is going to go obsolete during contract negotiations or even during execution or something, and we'll have an obsolescence that we have to go back and ask for an engineering change proposal for new scope to do millions of dollars to redesign around that obsolescence. Now we were giving our customer an opportunity. We could go to our customer, show them this long-term agreement, and give them an opportunity to increase the affordability of their system long-term. If they have money at some point that they want to spend to lock in these parts and buy all of them at a lower price, that's affordability for them. So as the details of this deal concluded, that's when I started to get a little bit more excited, because I thought, why can't we do this with, ad infinitum, with lots of different parts, even more complex assemblies? That would be great. And I started to wonder, what would the future actually look like? I think there's a great opportunity in this little illustration for companies, not just in aerospace and defense, but medical, automotive, the electronics manufacturers, industries, to collaborate with these types of agreements to suit their individual needs. Like, collaboration really is the key here. I thought this was a nice quote. I wanted to put that in there. It seemed apt for this conference. I see, just to put things into perspective a little bit, I can see like electronics companies with shorter lifespans could purchase short 1 or 2 year agreements for obsolete parts that cover them through what I think of as relatively small warranty periods, let's say on a personal computing device. Aerospace companies, of course, would do a lot longer agreement, and they would buy, you could almost call them tranches of agreements for a subsystem. So you'd buy all these agreements to protect all the obsolete parts in an entire subsystem, and you buy them through time as end of life happens, but you kind of set them all for the same dead date so that you're coinciding maybe with a redesign that you planned in. And so as time goes by, you're always hitting the same mark of when you plan to do a redesign anyway. So here, I'm going to take it one level deeper down this kind of rat hole of an idea. I think that, okay, so we've got the options contracts where you're buying access to, but not the obligation to buy a certain number of parts. And I think that it could work in multiple industries and very disparate companies doing very disparate things. So let's go one step further. What if you could not just buy one of these agreements from a distributor, but what if there was actually a marketplace that you could go to where you could purchase this agreement from some other company in some other industry to gain access to these parts. So let's walk through like just one scenario. Pretend that you're in a company. I'm going to ask for hands soon again to see if there's any people who have been in this situation. But let's say you've got a planned redesign, and the redesign is going to happen in 6 months. And you have a bunch of obsolete material, and you've got a certain stock of that material without having any more access to it. There is no more. And you've got 8 months worth of production. So you're fine. You've got margin, and you're going to work your redesign in. In 6 months, you're going to start producing that new design product, and everything's going to be fine. But then you hit a snag during the redesign, and you have problems in testing, and you have delays. And now suddenly you're looking at an obsolescence cliff. You're going to run out of parts. Your line is going to go down, and you're not going to be able to produce any more products until your redesign is complete. Does this sound familiar? Okay, good. My hypothetical example isn't totally bogus. What if you could go to a marketplace and buy that long-term agreement that gives you access to those parts that you need from some other company? What if there's a marketplace that you could enter? Maybe that other company bought some parts and they ended up not needing them because they actually had their shit together and they completed their redesign early before they ran out of obsolete material. Maybe they just bought too many, but they still had access. So what if you could buy that from them? Wouldn't that be great? From a more general perspective, and I put this slide up to say, I think that these options contracts for obsolete parts, we're not there today. Our supply chains aren't sophisticated enough, and probably our legal contract departments are not sophisticated enough right now to be able to do this. But what I really am excited about when I look into the future is I wonder if we actually do have the possibility someday to have companies in all these industries use options contracts for obsolete material the same way that financial companies on Wall Street might buy an options contract for stocks, using it like a hedge. And I think that it's possible for us to get there, but collaboration is the key. We have to collaborate. We have to ask the questions of each other, up and down the supply chain to one another, of what can we do? Is there anybody willing to offer up a solution that maybe I haven't thought of? We've heard it all day today. The pace is quickening. It's getting more and more complex as well as bigger. I'm not sure that we really can continue to grow our obsolescence management teams like the one I was a part of, larger and larger and larger, because it seems like we're just increasing the overhead life cycle costs for our products and pricing ourselves out of competitiveness. So what I'm trying to do here is introduce a new play in the obsolescence playbook and emphasize that that play isn't just this specific agreement that I've described. The play in the playbook is collaborating. If I could ask everybody to actually take an action here before I finish, if you have something to write on your phone, hint, hint, if you would take a moment to think of a person that you can contact, who would you call? Who is someone, whether it's in your organization, maybe it's your supply chain guy because you're an engineer, or maybe it's your finance person because they're always stopping you from doing what you want to do. Maybe it's somebody at your customer or a supplier of yours. Who is a person that you can call up and ask the question, who can we talk to, who should we talk to, and ask about a specific obsolescence issue that we have, and set up a meeting and just ask somebody else, what would you do if you were me? Is there room for some sort of collaboration on a solution to this problem? If you can make that note, put that person's name down, who is that person that you're going to call after FOM, and just ask that question. What do you have to lose? Thank you.